In our first activity, we're going to learn why inflation and unemployment vary in opposite directions in the short run. So imagine that you're in Econoland and businesses are producing goods and services, people are shopping, governments are building roads and highways, and businesses are exporting. So we're going to look at Econoland's economic activity in the aggregate. We can use what we know about short-run aggregate supply to begin to understand that analysis. So let's draw a short-run aggregate supply and demand, real GDP on the horizontal axis, price level on the vertical axis. And our short-run aggregate supply curve is upward sloping. We can represent all those levels of spending on the part of government and businesses and households and foreign buyers with aggregate demand. We have an initial short-run equilibrium level of output and an initial level on average of prices. Now remember, on this vertical axis, when we have real GDP, that is our measure of output. So we have information about output on this axis. Two-sector circular flow chart, output equals income. So we have information about levels of income on this axis, and employment levels and unemployment levels vary with the level of output. So when output increases, levels of employment increase, and when output increases, levels of unemployment decrease. So all this information is on this horizontal axis on aggregate supply and aggregate demand, and that's going to become an important part of the story for building the short-run Phillips curve. Our short-run Phillips curve tells a very similar story with a little bit different construct. Instead of having price level on the vertical axis, we have rates of inflation. And they're not exactly the same thing, but they do tell the same story. And we have unemployment rates on the horizontal axis. So in the short run, if we have an upward sloping short-run aggregate supply curve, and let's suppose that government decides to build more roads and highways, and so that would be an increased level of spending that would increase aggregate demand, we can show that by showing aggregate demand shifting to the right. We now have a new level of output, income, and employment that's greater than the original one, which means the level of unemployment has gone down. And we have a new price level that's higher, which can mean that inflation has increased. So let's suppose that we want to find a point on our short-run Phillips curve that is representative of this original equilibrium point. And let's just say it's right here. We now are at a point with our new equilibrium where prices are higher on average, output is higher, unemployment is lower. So that could be represented by a point here where we have less unemployment and higher level of prices. Conversely, we could have a situation where consumer confidence declines, and when consumer confidence declines, consumption spending goes down, so aggregate demand would reflect that change by shifting to the left. We now have a new short-run equilibrium with lower levels of output. That would mean that unemployment is increasing with lower levels of prices. So once again, here's our inverse relationship between price level and unemployment. So to reflect that new short-run equilibrium with aggregate supply and demand, we could move over to our Phillips curve analysis and show more unemployment and lower inflation, let's say at this point. Once we connect these dots, we now have created a short-run Phillips curve that shows inflation and unemployment that is inverse in the short run. Okay, let's review what is unchanging in the short run and what is changing in the short run. We said that for a short-run aggregate supply curve, a given short-run aggregate supply curve, that nominal wages and other input prices are unchanging. So when we move from this initial equilibrium to this second equilibrium, we have price level increasing, and that price level increasing means that real wages go down as nominal wages are unchanging. We also assume in the short run that inflationary expectations are held constant, and that becomes an important piece of the puzzle when we get to our analysis of long-run Phillips curve. Now that you have a better understanding of the short-run relationship between inflation and unemployment in Econoland, we want you to practice using short-run Phillips curve analysis to analyze economic situations.